Yes, Grenada. A very good Monday morning to you. And I say very good Monday morning, sort of tongue-in-cheek, if you will, because I would imagine that, hold on a sec here, hold on a sec. Yeah, I would imagine that many of us are commiserating with the folks out there in the Bahamas. Boy, are they taking a pounding. And they have been for the past 24 hours or so, and it looks like it ain't over yet for them. Next in line, the southeastern coast of the United States. And there still seems to be some uncertainty as to exactly where in the U.S. Dorian's going to hit and how severe that hit is going to be. So please, let's keep the people of the Bahamas in our prayers. Last night I watched a video which came from the Bahamas of a lady crying out, just crying out for prayer. Not just for her, but for her child as well. It was heart-wrenching to watch and brought back a lot of memories of 2004 when we had Ivan here. I was busy on the air providing coverage of what was happening, so I didn't have an awful lot of time to stop and think. But yeah, I remember very, very vividly what those 6 or 8 hours were like. And I pray that I never, never have to live through that again. I'm darn lucky to be alive. Okay. Hazel, can you guys come up with a special award for Hazel? Because I see she's first up again this morning. Hazel Ferguson wins the race this morning on this Labor Day. And by the way, happy Labor Day weekend to those of you in the United States. Second is Anthea Rello. Anthea, good to see you, my friend. Haven't talked to your brother in a little while, but I hope that he's doing fine. If you do speak with him, just give him my regards. Pele Darbo, sign that there's no cricket. Pele is number 3. And Hazel says, happy and blessed Monday, everyone. Sean is out there in the Azores. Arthur Langine is saying happy Labor Day, Brother George. Well, not for me down here. It's a normal work day for us. And by the way, it's a beautiful morning here. I'll tell you one thing this morning. We've been talking about the seaweed that's been showing up on Grandans for the past few days. Well, I'll tell you, this morning on the balcony, just before I came in here, I was looking out across the bay here, and there is a large mass of seaweed heading for Grandans. So I wouldn't be surprised if it gets pretty nasty down there later on today. Yeah, huge mass. We weren't there yesterday, but when we went on Saturday morning, it really wasn't that bad. Yes, there was seaweed on the beach, but really wasn't that bad. But I hate to think, and we didn't go this morning, by the way. Sharon's a little bit under the weather. But I'm looking forward to getting down there tomorrow, and we'll have an update for you. Hola, Margaret. How you doing, girl? Certainly hope you have enjoyed your weekend of jerk chicken. Yes. Oswald Lewis is saying good morning. She's in New York. Sean says, I just heard a 7-year-old was confirmed dead and sister still missing. God bless them. Yes, Sean, I haven't heard that, but I expect that there will be more. At least one of the stations in the Bahamas has been providing pretty good live coverage. And I want to say thank you very much to Peter Bishop, who sent a link to me this morning. There was one I was watching last night. I'm not sure it's the same one that he sent this morning, but very good coverage of what's been taking place up there in the Bahamas. Please, God, spare them. It's It's horrendous. And by the way, here comes Peter as well, saying good morning. Now, Kipling sending God's blessings to everyone. John is saying, testing. What are you testing, John? Your next mug? Oh, John. Folks, let's take a look. We got an unusual program this morning. I think it's going to surprise you folks to know that we are not going to bring you a national report this morning. There's an issue which I believe is of crucial, and I mean crucial, importance to a lot of Grenadians. I'm talking about the people who lost their investments in the Cleco-Bico fiasco. And yesterday we took a look at that situation. I had with me Dr. Patrick Antoine, who is part of a team that's trying to help people recover their monies. And I thought this morning I should make way. For those of you who were not able to join us yesterday, I thought I should make way to bring you a rebroadcast of that conversation that Patrick and I had yesterday. We're going to do it in two parts. The first part is captioned "A Light at the End of the Tunnel for Fleeced Insurance Policyholders." That's a question. I tell you, one of the things you're going to find out is that don't expect to get all your money back. Don't. No. From what I heard yesterday, you may be able to get back 20, 25, maybe even 30%. Huh? Sad, isn't it? Sad. Well, Patrick and I had a pretty interesting chat yesterday, and we're going to share that with you this morning in two parts. And towards the end of the program, couldn't help letting this question sneak in. You know, there's a lot of talk about the next leader of the National Democratic Congress is going to be. And there are a number of names being bandied about around town, and one of them is Patrick Antoine. So, my dear friends, towards the end of the program yesterday, I asked him whether or not he does have aspirations of leading the National Democratic Congress. And we got an answer. So that's a little teaser I'm just putting out there. And stick around, my dear friends, stick around and you'll find out. But the major focus of this morning's program is about the Bico-Cleco fiasco. Some of the stuff you're going to be hearing this morning, you may already be aware of. Some of it may be new to you, okay? They're going to be holding a meeting here, I think on Wednesday of this week. You'll find out all the details when you listen to this little piece. Let's see here. Fitzroy Adams is also checking in, saying good morning to you guys. And Kipling is asking the question, who remembers Mr. Uriah Butler? Grenadians. I remember the name. I know who the person is, but I really don't know an awful lot about Mr. Butler. Arthur Langine says, George, thank you for not bringing the NR. Anthea Rello says, I knew you would be happy. Claude Putner is saying good morning to you, Mr. Grant. Hey, Claude, George is okay. And class, he says, it's a good day in Grenada, praying for the Hurricane Island. Yeah, boy. And I certainly hope everybody else joins you on that. Deborah, hello, Deborah. She's saying good morning, George. Happy to see you. All right. Yeah, Deborah, this thing is about 1,200 miles or so away from us, closer to you guys in the United States. She says her heart goes out to the ones who've been hit by Dorian. I think we share that too. Loxley Bowen saying good morning. Little late for class, but I'm here. Well, you're not that late. Haven't missed a whole lot. All right, folks, so let's take our first little break, and then we'll come back with Patrick Antoine. And believe me, check it out. Not just for those of you who lost your investments in that fiasco, but for those of you who may be thinking about making similar investments. Break time.
Because your vehicle is a necessity, being roadworthy is critical. Hubbard's Motor Department introduces its new tire and battery sales and service outlet located at Building Supplies Compound in Grand Anse, close to the Sugar Mill Roundabout. Available are a wide range of competitively priced tires, maintenance-free batteries, oils and lubricants. Keeping in mind your busy schedule, this outlet is equipped to provide you with fast and reliable service. Simply drive in and you'll be delighted with your service experience. For more information, contact 440-2087. Hubbard's, quality service, affordable prices.
You don't know how many hurricanes will be coming this season, so you need to be prepared. At Hubbard's Hardware and Building Supply Departments and Food Fair Supermarkets, everything from canned foods, flashlights and batteries, to plywood, tarpaulin, lanterns, roof repair kits, water tanks, etc. are available. For over 90 years, we've helped you prepare for and recover from storms. Hubbard's Hardware, Food Fair Supermarkets, and the Grenadian General Insurance, an integral part of your hurricane preparedness plan.
Good morning, Grenlek Meter Reader.
Morning, Mr. Meterman. I'm glad I caught you. Last month, I got a very high bill, and I don't understand why.
Last month, we were not able to access your meter, so we had to estimate the bill. This will happen if we don't get an actual reading.
So, what can I do to ensure that my meter is easily accessible?
Well, you can get your licensed electrician to move your meter outside of the gate or directly in front of the house. That way, I'll have easy access and I won't have to deal with your dog.
Ah, Butch.
Yes, dogs can be a problem sometimes. On one occasion, I was attacked by a dog and police had to get involved. Customers who don't want to cage or tie their dogs should really move their meter and make it easily accessible.
Well, I'll consider that.
Thank you.
Grenlek, energizing our Grenada.
Yeah, I just got whipped. There's a note here from Margaret. Margaret says, "No, Gigi, say that isn't so. Butler is synonymous with the labor movement in the region, especially the oil field workers in Trinidad and Tobago." Absolutely, Margaret, absolutely. But Mags, I don't know if you missed it, my dear, but time and time again over the last 15 years, I have told my viewers and listeners that I was lousy, and I mean lousy, when it comes to history. To the best of my recollection, Margaret, I have probably flunked every history test that I ever did. Give me math, give me chemistry and physics and English, right up my alley. But I can't lie to you, girl. You know me too well. I can't lie to you. I bummed out on history. Okay, so having said all of that, let's get down to the first part of that program that was aired yesterday morning with Dr. Patrick Antoine. Here we go. Alrighty, folks, time to say good morning to our good colleague. There he is, Dr. Patrick Antoine. Patrick, good morning. How are you, sir?
Good morning, George. I'm very well. It's great to be with you on this beautiful morning in Grenada.
And where are you in Grenada this morning?
Yes, I got in a short while ago. I would have joined you, but I didn't want to disrupt your program.
Boy, let me tell you, you couldn't do any more disruption than we have already had this morning. But thanks a lot. You know, Patrick, it's always such a pleasure talking with you. I like to think of you as an all too infrequent visitor. If only you could keep your tail here in Grenada for a little bit, we get to see a little bit more of you, wouldn't we?
Well, I'd love to be here, particularly because this is where my heart continues to be, and of course, the core of my family. But unfortunately, circumstances are what they are. You sort of you roam to where the work takes you.
Absolutely, absolutely. Patrick, we know that you're an accomplished attorney. You were Grenada's former ambassador to the OECS. If I were to ask you to tell me, who is Patrick Antoine? What the heck would you say, Patrick?
If you were to ask me, who am I?
Yeah.
Well, I would first of all say that I am certainly, I would begin by telling you I'm the son of Joyce and Alphonsus Antoine of blessed memory. This is my father.
Yes, remember.
And for me, that means a lot. Most people don't know this, but we have a direct link to when we first arrived from a very proud, strong Negro Igbo man who arrived as a slave who was nicknamed Gru Gru. And of course, from him came a lot of the genes and a lot of the dynamism and a lot of the energy and certainly the acumen and acuity, which I think most of my family members have been bequeathed with. And then I would tell you that I'm a product of our society, that were it not for Mrs. Antoine, Timothy Antoine's mother, and my own mother, Joyce Antoine, and so many other people who have invested in me as a student, as a budding reprobate at that time. I would then take you to Cadgett and Hood, who you've heard me speak about quite. Then I would take you to George Brazan. And I would say that I'm a product of all of these people. I'm a product of St. Andrews and Montmorris and Tempe and certainly Granance, and all of those things go into a melting pot in making Patrick Antoine who he is. And to my mind, all of that is underscored by a just indefatigable belief in Jesus Christ. Just an absolutely incredible grounding in God, though as a teenager you deviate. In the years before us, we tend to converge back, and I'm certainly back now in the fold of a practicing, believing, faith-trumping man of God, and that is where I am now, and I'm a father.
You just made my day, Patrick. You just made my day. Now, the reason why you are sitting here with me this morning is because sometime during the week, I received a press release which I think has given a lot of hope. I published it on the Grenada Broadcast website, and I think it's given Grenadians a lot of hope that their dream of recuperating some of their investment, at least some of their investment, has not all been shattered. And I see here that there's a group calling themselves the Expert Trade Law. What the heck is Expert Trade Law? Because they're about to pursue the recuperation of these people's funds.
Yeah, George, well, I think you've touched on a very important issue for our civilization, not just now, but our civilization going forward. Civilization in Grenada, civilization in the OECS. Yes, a lot of people are invested in British American and CLECO. And the promise then was that they would get higher rates of interest, higher rates of return, rates on the investment, above that which was offered by the commercial banks and the other investment instruments around at that time. And you have to understand that this is where the story becomes important and interesting, because many of those people did those investments not only because they wanted higher rates, but because they felt the higher rates were safe. And they felt it was safe because many of the government entities, the statutory corporations, they themselves had invested in those instruments, and in many of those instances, there was government representation on the board of those institutions. And of course, many believing investors at that time were of the view that these investment instruments were actually monitored and sanctioned by the Ministry of Finance, the Supervisor of Insurance, etc. And so they felt that there was minimal risk having regard to all the factors I just told you. Not so. As you know, in 2009 was the perfect storm. And of course, the British American investments went belly up along with the Clico policyholders investments, with the CL Financial debacle in Trinidad and Tobago, where they were forced to approach the government for a loan, as it were, because they were facing liquidity challenges. And of course, the government did not grant a loan. Instead, they stepped in and assumed the assets of the entities. And with that, they ring-fenced the assets in Trinidad and Tobago. So this is where I think the issue really becomes. And with them ring-fencing the assets in Trinidad, Georgia, and with the Barbadian government ring-fencing the assets in Barbados, it left the OECS countries out that did not have the supervisor of insurance, as it were, maintain the statutory fund at a level that would cover the investment instruments in the individual OECS countries. So again, that is where we are. And a lot of people have been hurt, as you've properly pointed out.
But let me ask you
Yes.
this. Let me ask you this, because you just touched on a very important point. You said these people made their investments, one, because they wanted a higher yield, but probably more importantly, because they trusted that these investments would be safe. Now, maybe not everybody goes through the proper due diligence, but would it be fair on my part to assume that many people did go through the due diligence and found the investment to be safe? In which case, one has to ask the question, is there anything more they could have done better to guarantee the safety of their investments?
Very complex question. Let me answer it this way. Again, your question is always very intuitive. The first part of your question regarding whether the proper due diligence was undertaken, and if it was, would it have made a difference, is very, very important. Let me say that I'm perhaps one of the last persons to have put money in British America. And I say so without any embarrassment, now, though at the time I was extremely embarrassed when the thing went belly up. But let me tell you that I did my due diligence. And the problem that we have, George, is that the accounts were not properly prepared. We have some challenges in believing the credibility of some of the numbers, and that is, of course, subject to a different process, which is why I'm so cautious with my language. Only to say that it appears as though the accountants or the accounting firms may have been certifying accounts that should not have been certified, may have been signing off on accounts and giving it a clean bill of health or rights of passage, as I would say when I lecture, that really should have received a very soon and sudden stop. Something's wrong here. So that when you look at the accounts of some of the entities and you look at the accounts of CL Financial, you are never really getting a complete picture of what the true status of the companies were, because the accounts were deliberately reported in a manner, to my mind, as an economist, which was intended to mislead. That's the first set of issues. Now, if Patrick Antoine can be telling you that, then you have to understand that Mrs. James from Piti Bakai, who doesn't have an economics degree, even when she asks her questions, isn't going to be as piercing in her questioning as I would have been. And if I could have said and carried out the due diligence, I found it okay. We can then understand why so many ordinary people were also caught in this. In short, I'm saying that there was a problem. But the second problem is that they trusted the system at home. So if you were St. Lucian, you would not have had as major a problem as if you were non-St. Lucian in the context of the OECS, because the St. Lucian supervisor of insurance made sure that the statutory fund was maintained at a level sufficient to cover the investments from St. Lucians in British America, while that was not the case in, for instance, Grenada, St. Vincent, Dominica, etc. And of course, now that I know how this thing unfolded, the story gets curious and curiouser. But point of fact is that there were a number of systemic failures, including failures, I believe, in the way in which these investments that are not domiciled, not maintained, controlled, and operated from your own jurisdiction was handled. So yes, there was in fact a trust factor that was put there by policyholders, and that trust was breached, pure and simple. It was breached.
So essentially what you're saying to me, Patrick, in somewhat different words, is that this is a very complex matter, very complex. Now, I know that a lot of time has elapsed and a lot of people are now aware of the CLECO-BICO issue. I want you to take a minute and take a few minutes and do a summary of what has us where we are today, having this conversation. And then we'll talk about how you intend to go about handling this.
Yeah, sure. So where we are today, George, is that people like myself felt hard done by. And in 2010, personally, I contracted individually, as Patrick Antoine Joe Public, a legal team in Trinidad to help me get my own funds back. And I tried to interest parties in Grenada and the other countries at that time, but many people were very frankly put, George, embarrassed. Many people were embarrassed because people would find out how much money they lost, i.e. how much money they had. And of course, in these small countries, that we have our own idiosyncrasies, and people finding out that you have $1 or $2 million or $500,000 in British American is a source of embarrassment for some people. Of course, later, we found that there was an appetite for the sort of, let us call it the broad-based, I want to say the armada, the group support, to go after our rights where these policies were concerned. But let me just say that part of the reason why people did not act early too, George, that's the second thing, is because they believe that the governments would have stepped in and that the governments would have come to some agreement with the government of Trinidad and Tobago and perhaps Barbados in relation to the assets and, of course, to making sure that they were made whole. Because, George, you have to understand that the several auditing reports have suggested, though we haven't seen the most recent one, that the assets are now sufficient to pay all the policyholders completely. And you would know, too, that Trinidad and Tobago policyholders have been paid completely because the government stepped in and assumed the assets and gave a loan against it and paid the policyholders in Trinidad and Tobago out. So that the policyholders in Trinidad and Tobago, for the most part, have been made whole. That's a little bit of a detail we can get into later. But the OECS policyholders have not been made whole at all. And so we've come under this thing called judicial management. Of course, that was put in place, properly so, to make sure that the little bit of assets that existed in the OECS and that the OECS policyholders could in fact, through the legal systems, get their hands around, that those were used for the benefit of all the policyholders and not just a few. So we are under judicial management, and finally we came to this plan of arrangement, which basically, tells us that, look, the assets that are there We've been able to recover some more assets, and the point of fact is that, we can expect between 20, 25, perhaps 30 cents on the dollar at best, which of course means that up to 70 cents on the dollar is not going to be recouped from the existing assets that the judicial managers have been able to track and trace and bring into their pot for distribution. So where we are today, George, is that we have a very peculiar situation in CARICOM where all the assets of the companies were built up by the policyholders from the Eastern Caribbean, from other Caribbean countries, from Trinidad and Tobago, from Barbados, from other CARICOM states. So we all contributed to building up those assets through CL Financial. CL Financial was controlled by the group from Trinidad and Tobago, so that giving them that control, they made decisions on where they invest, what they would do with the assets coming in from the Eastern Caribbean and other states where policyholders would buy policies. And of course, we know that they made a number of bad decisions, so that they made bad decisions as a board, CL Financial, and of course their subsidiaries as well. Many of them would have acquiesced in this decision, i.e. they would have agreed. So where we are now is that the government of Trinidad and Tobago comes in the case of Trinidad and Tobago, and it says, great, these are all the assets, the companies, the investments that the policyholders from all the countries, including Trinidad and Tobago, the monies would have built up these assets. The companies that CL would have bought were bought with our funds. And they would have stepped in and said, look, we're keeping these assets, we're going to give a loan against it, and we're going to pay off the Trinidad and Tobago policyholders only. Now, that's a breach in the treaty. That's called discriminatory treatment, because you can't use assets built up from my investment, essentially ring fence it, and use it in a discriminatory manner when it comes to essentially giving a benefit from the asset, discriminating by nationality. And our view is that discrimination by nationality is a fundamental breach of the revised Treaty of Chaguaramas, which talks about discrimination on the grounds of nationality alone. And we believe that we have a strong case to make before the CCJ. We think that the case is not just a legal case, it's a moral case. We are engaged in a moral battle. It's morally wrong for a government to step in, to take the assets of a private entity, to take loans against it, and to essentially treat with it as it deems fit, without treating with all the policyholders in the same way.
All right.
We think it's morally wrong. Go ahead, please.
Patrick, you did mention that the government of Trinidad and Tobago did step in, but you said something a little while ago that sort of has my head spinning here. You said that these investors were embarrassed. Why would they be embarrassed? I mean, these guys are not investing in a little shack on the Carinae. You're talking about Clico, Bico, major corporations. Why would I be embarrassed to invest with these people?
Well, I don't think they were embarrassed to invest with them. I think they were embarrassed that their peers, the community, their friends, even the governments may find out that they had substantial investments, or they had investments in British America. That is the sense I get. And you have to understand, George, that I had to meet with a number of people quietly. And they were the major issue for them was people finding out that they had X amount of money in this thing that they lost. Yes, there was that embarrassment. I use the term embarrassment because I think that's what it was. But I think it was born of several factors, and one of which is islandness. You just don't want the next man to know how well you are, because we have a way of saying, well, boy, I ain't doing good at all, trouble hitting me. Of course, the truth is that when you look at the monies that we had invested in British America, and if we had used it, otherwise, our civilization would have been a lot better off. We would not have needed as much foreign direct investment if we'd invested in our own countries with good returns. So there's a lesson there for us as well. But people were embarrassed. I can tell you that. And up to recently, we got a strong letter from judicial manager because one of the people who are policyholders wrote saying, look, I do not want my information to be released to anyone except to the negotiating team. But let me answer the question on expert trade law. Expert trade law is a group of attorneys and negotiators that have been contracted by British American and CLECO policyholders now of the Eastern Caribbean. It started with Grenada, but you will hear later that we are expanding it to the rest of the Eastern Caribbean. So BACOL, of which I'm the president, would have contracted this group, Expert Trade Law. And Expert Trade Law is comprised of lead attorney, call him the advocate, Simon Davenport QC, from 3 Here Court, one of the leading firms in the United Kingdom in this area. Secondly, of course, they come with a whole team of lawyers. He has juniors and so on working with him. Then we have, interestingly, Dr. Kenny Anthony, who is part of Expert Trade Law, and he's come on as the community law specialist. And Dr. Anthony, people would recall, was perhaps the first general counsel at CARICOM after the revised Treaty of Chaguaramas was adopted by heads. So he's come with a lot of experience, practically and otherwise. And of course, you know his tenure as Prime Minister of St. Lucia. We also have a team of young and very bright lawyers who have worked a lot on CCJ matters. Rafaela Joda, who worked recently on the matter with TCL, Trinidad Cement Limited. Gerald Thompson, who actually led the Legal and Marine Affairs Division in the Ministry of Foreign Affairs in Trinidad and Tobago for a significant amount of time and helped to negotiate the revised Treaty of Chaguaramas and the protocols that led to countries adopting all the provisions in the treaty. So this is Expert Trade Law, and they have the mandate from us of, as it were, giving support and leading the charge on behalf of BACOL before the CCJ. There are a number of other attorneys that are associated with the venture, but I've just called the major ones for you, and that's who Expert Trade Law is. So Expert Trade Law will be, representatives will be here with us this week because they're embarking on an OECS road tour, really to talk about the case and to drum up support politically on the ground among the populace, not among the politicians, the populace, for the importance of the OECS civilization to stand up and to be counted on this matter, if only for posterity, but also on the grounds that are legal.
All right. Now, a few minutes ago, you mentioned to me that there are assets, and these assets are sufficient to repay the policyholders, correct?
That's correct, George. And
where are the assets?
Correct.
Where are the assets, Patrick?
The assets are held, for instance, CL Financial is one of the biggest shareholders in Republic Bank, right? They also own substantially most of the shares in Angostura. And they have a number of other investments where these investments are not doing badly. The government has been repaid, George, follow me. The government of Trinidad and Tobago has been repaid, they have been repaid from the revenues of these companies. And this is a very contentious issue with both the policyholders in Trinidad who feel that they didn't get their pound of flesh closest to the heart, though they got their pound of flesh. They didn't get it closest to the heart because it ended up being 85% of the pound of flesh that they should have gotten. And the policyholders outside, like ourselves, where we believe that we're only going to get 30% at best, what to my mind is looking more like 25% if we're lucky, or 20%. The judicial managers are working hard on this. I take a different view to many people on this matter. We have to pay professionals, and the guys have done yeoman service, George, in trying to chase down some of these assets. but we're going to get 20 or 25 cents. So it means the people in Grenada and St. Vincent, Dominica, St. Lucia, St. Kitts, Antigua and Barbuda, Anguilla, Montserrat, those people are going to be ending up with, rather than with $1 of the investment they put in, more like with 75 or 75% of that not being recouped, which means that they would only get back 25 cents on the dollar. So to my mind, the assets that are there since the government has been paid off already can be used to settle those people in the Eastern Caribbean whose investments built up those companies and who remain unpaid today.
Okay.
And that is our claim, and we think we have a good ground for that, because Trinidad and Tobago established a payoff arrangement using bonds, for instance, that we think is attractive, though we think it need not be as the tenure, we call it the tenure of the bond, the length of years. The tenure of the bond can be shorter, and the upfront payment to Eastern Caribbean policyholders, is certainly something that we believe is on the card. So that's the way I want to answer this question, and giving a sense to the public about why this is not hocus pocus. The government of Trinidad and Tobago has been repaid, and the assets are continue to perform, but the people who built up the assets from the Eastern Caribbean are the only ones. I say Eastern Caribbean, but there are other CARICOM states as well. So you may have a Jamaican, but predominantly the OECS people have not been repaid.
I did suggest to you that it would be worth your time to listen to this. Huh? I hope that you're glad that you did. A couple of comments here I want to share with you guys. The first and second actually, from Margaret. Margaret says, And then she quotes here, I think she's quoting Patrick, they trusted the system at home. That was not the case in Grenada, St. Vincent, etc., unquote. She goes on to say, but wasn't Timothy Antoine the supervisor of insurance in Grenada at the time of these investments? Why is he not being called to task? If Timothy couldn't manage Grenada properly, how can we trust him to manage the ECCB, that's the Eastern Caribbean Central Bank? To use a biblical reference, if he couldn't be faithful in the little things, can he be faithful in the big things? So says Mags. And then she also goes on to say, as I'm listening to this, I couldn't help but wonder, whatever happened to the people who lost their money in the Grenada building and loan? Probably got you guys asking yourself some questions as well. She says, the silence on that remains deafening. Oops. Just remember, Grenadians don't do them thing. Yes, Margaret. Yes, Margaret. Yes, Margaret. All right, folks. Ryan Jabon says he's waiting on Hurricane Dorian, and Ryan is out there in Orlando. We're keeping our pinkies crossed, Ryan, and sending out a little prayer on your behalf. John says, managers and lawyers getting their money first. I betcha. Then the investors, if there's any left. You know something? It's interesting you should mention that, John, because during that interview yesterday, that's the same thought that went through my mind. Could you imagine? The investors are probably only going to be getting 20, 25, maybe 30% back. What happened to the other 70%? Man. Well, let me tell you, if you thought that first piece was interesting, I want you to hang in there. Second piece, going to be just as interesting. I see some folks here. Earl Joseph Maitland is with us. Marshall Dollars Lewis is with us. Oh, the big guns are in town this morning. Randall Robinson is in town this morning. Yeah? You guys are going to be especially interested in the comments coming up towards the end of our next little piece.
Juve chocolates, cocoa nibs, and cocoa balls from Diamond Estate Grenada are now available at Amazon.com, Amazon.ca, Amazon.co.uk, and GrenadaMarket.com. Try their sensational touch of nutmeg and a touch of ginger chocolates, 75% dark and rich, 100% pure cocoa, and their 60% dark and sweet chocolate bars today. Amazon Prime members enjoy free shipping on these orders in the USA, Canada, and Europe. GrenadaMarket.com. When you can't come to the island, the products of the island will come to you.
In our part of the world, we need to be prepared for natural disasters like storms and hurricanes, even outside of the season. I'm sure you'll agree that keeping our loved ones, homes, and businesses safe is important. So, I came up with a few quick tips to help you stay safe. First, make a family disaster plan and ensure that everyone in your household is familiar and comfortable with it. Remember to add batteries and flashlights to your emergency kit. Now for electrical safety. Familiarize yourself with your electrical panel, as it may be necessary to switch off the power during a storm or flood. Make sure you install a transfer or isolation switch to prevent your generator feeding electricity to Grenlec's line. If trees are too close to power lines, call Grenlec at 237 for advice. By following these easy steps, you will be well on your way to being hurricane ready. Don't be caught off guard by natural disasters. Prepare now. For more information, visit grenlec.com.
Can I have a chicken lunch, please? Large.
Real nice today.
I don't want that.
Well, you just asked for a chicken lunch.
I don't have problem with the lunch. Afraid the container.
What is the problem with it?
These styrofoam containers, they don't good for the environment. They shorten with life.
What foolishness you telling me? So what you want me to use?
Put my food in this.
Where you get that?
At the food fair, where you could get all biodegradable food boxes and disposable food supplies like cups, plates, anything you could think about. Name it, it's there. And they don't harm the environment. Food fair, taking the lead in cleaning up and protecting the environment. Hey, like you take me advice, you get in your biodegradable food supplies.
Well, girl, I supporting who supporting the environment. That is why I shop in at food fair.
Food fair, where you can fill your baskets without emptying your pockets. Products distributed by Hubbard's agency, Kirani James Boulevard.
All right, now just before I fire up the second and final piece with Dr. Patrick Antoine, I see that we've now been joined by Dennis Charles. Good to see you, Dennis. Where's Kipling? You there, Kippy? See what you started, boy? You got something going here this morning, and I'm holding you responsible. First of all, Margaret, took a little turn in my tail over the Uriah Buzz Butler, okay? And she said here, to make it worse, he was from Guave, suggesting that, maybe, come on, George, this man was actually Grenadian, he's from Guave, you should know all about Buzz. Well, and Kipling says, yes, he called the biggest labor strike in Trinidad. Okay, I'm delighted that you people are so knowledgeable about history. So once I started running that little piece a little while ago, I decided, you know what? Let me send a WhatsApp to my good friend, Margaret. And I said, girl, leave me alone, eh? Well, here's Margaret's response. Tubal Uriah Buzz Butler is from Guave and a cousin of my uncle. So I said, well, okay. No wonder you know the man. She says, not because of the relationship. He was just someone that everyone knew of when I was a kid. In fact, when I was in primary school and we had class quiz, one of my favorite questions to ask was, what does OWTU stand for? Oilfield Workers Trade Union. He led that, she said. Folks, you see, Kipling, you have afforded our listenership and viewership this morning with a great class, some education about buzz. Yeah. All right. Kipling says, yes, here I am. John seems to be having some trouble out there, and John, you're scaring the heck out of me, because I'm still sitting here hoping that one of these days I could jump on the Osprey or Dolly C or one of them and come do a program up there. But the internet that you guys are having up there, I mean, if you think we're bad down here, I could just imagine Carriacou. You guys are having a lot of problems in Carriacou, so that kind of deters me a little bit from coming up to Carriacou. John's been having a number of dropouts. He's now had 3 of them already this morning. All right, folks, here is part 2 of that conversation between Dr. Patrick Antoine and moi yesterday morning. And like I said, the Maitlands and everybody else who's on there, Randall Robinson and Marcel Peters, you guys better hang in there and listen to the end of this piece from Patrick. Okay, Patrick, 20%, 25%, even 30%. You're talking a pittance, which could mean an awful lot to a lot of people who are losing 70, 75, 80% of their monies. A lot. And over the years, a name we've heard surface quite a bit was that of one Mr. Dupree. From your perspective, his role in all of this, and people are asking the question, how come this man has been allowed to walk free? Let me hear you on both of those, Patrick.
George, we have tried to focus on the task of getting the funds back rather than on the matters regarding pursuing, as it were, justice, where Mr. Dupree and his team, because he wasn't alone, have been concerned. In fact, Mr. Dupree and his team were found culpable in a Florida Circuit Court, and if you read the judgment, it is really a very strong indictment of them all. It is tragic for me, George, for 2 reasons. Mr. Dupree inherited this vision from his father, Cyril Dupree. Mr. Dupree, this is Lawrence's father, would have had a vision of this pan-OECS, pan-Caribbean investment company. And I make no apology for saying that many people were drawn to that because after independence, we didn't have many black entrepreneurs emerging in the Caribbean with a pan-Caribbean vision. Yes, and I want people listening to understand my view. Black people with a pan-Caribbean vision. And that is why that vision was so important. And Lawrence Dupree then took the baton. And no one should find me culpable of misleading them if Cyril was his uncle and not his father. But my memory tells me it was his father. But what's important is the vision. Lawrence took that vision and he was able to develop this franchise model with this insurance company across the Caribbean. And it was a model which, to my mind, George, could have worked well if, George, there was no fraud. George, you have to understand that I differ from many people who argue that the rates were unsustainable. I say nonsense. Absolute nonsense. Methanol Holdings Limited, which was a company that was started by investments from the CL Group, for instance, the investment projections was that this company should have paid off for itself in 10 to 12 years. In fact, George, the methanol prices went up and it paid off for itself in 2 to 3 years. And at that time, methanol prices were high, and Trinidad and Tobago, of course, was the second largest exporter of methanol to the United States. So there were a lot of very good investments. Angostura was a good investment, though they may have paid a little too much for it, but they also invested in some very interesting brands. So the vision was a good vision. And I say that I'm saddened because with that, to my mind, has died this pan-Caribbean vision for investments in the way that the old Dupree intended it, where it would bring benefits back to the policyholders in the countries, not just an insurance instrument, but benefits back to them from the returns on those investments. And that's the sad part. Mr. Dupree is up in age. He may be just beyond 80. I met with him on 3 occasions, personally, on behalf of the Backhaul Group. And it is clear to me that he's not benefiting from his best health. So there's not much merit in expecting that Mr. Dupree would be made to pay anything. He doesn't have many assets at his personal disposal. I believe the judicial managers are locked in battle with various estates. So to my mind, really for us, the biggest benefit at this stage is not seeing Mr. Dupree behind bars. There's no merit to that really, and that doesn't bring our money back. And Mr. Dupree, for the rest of his years, will have to live with his conscience. And I sense that he had a problem living with his conscience when I met with him, because I could tell that this was a man under very serious duress and stress, knowing that he'd caused such calamity in so many people's lives. But that's a matter for him and God. We needed to focus on getting the funds back. And for us, the way that we need to do that is to go after that entity that aggrandized the assets and used it for its own purposes. And that is how I want to get around the issue of Mr. Dupree, by focusing us squarely back on where do we get full compensation from, so that we can end up with a dollar on the dollar.
And I imagine that on Tuesday, that's what you're going to be trying to share with the policyholders when you meet with them here.
Indeed.
All right. Let's assume that you have an audience of policyholders right now. I want you to speak to them because, Patrick, sometimes even people who stand to recoup some of their monies are sometimes complacent. And I want you to speak to these people and get them out there en masse on Tuesday. Talk to them.
George, thank you for this opportunity. Again, I think this is a profound moment, and I trust that your broadcast does go far and wide on this occasion. Look, what I would say to the policyholders in the Eastern Caribbean, whether you're members of Backhaul or not, is that there is a time in our civilization, in our historical context, and when we have to make a stand. And these occasions have arisen in the past on 3 or 4 occasions in our region's history. We had, of course, emancipation, then we had the end of colonialism, then we had independence. And to my mind, this is one of those defining moments for our Caribbean civilization, when, having regard to the fact that we have lost so much of our assets, of our wealth, in a manner which, to my mind, goes contrary to everything that we would have signed up for and signed on to as a CARICOM community, we need to make a stand. We need to make a stand not only because we want to get the money back. We need to make a stand because we need to send a strong signal that we believe in this construct of a Caribbean civilization that is non-discriminatory and that treats rich and poor big country and small country, investor, and the companies that benefit from the investment in a rules-based system that is all the same. And whether we win this battle or we lose this battle, history must not record us as having stood idly by while so much of our wealth was taken away from us without so much as a fight from us to defend that which in fact is our entitlement. This is such a defining moment to my mind, George, for the OECS, and I know it's been a long time coming. People are becoming frustrated. I started this battle alone in 2009. We're now in 2019. I have spent countless hours trying to find a way with others so that we could carve a path that was legally possible to the possibility of a successful outcome at the CCJ. Many people have been on this battle and this journey with us for 3 or 4 years. A couple of others 5, Bacall is 5 years old. And I know they expected to have results by now. But our scripture tells us that weeping lasts for a night, but joy cometh in the morning. And we did not, George, have all the information we needed. We had to scratch, and we had to connive, and we had to use intrigue, and we had to use every known tactic to get at a lot of the information that we now have, which enables us to make a case. And the court will also hear that, because the court will want to know what took us so long. We are very clear. There were very deliberate efforts to ensure that we did not have the information to go to court. And we are able to show that. So to my mind, George, I want to say to them, do not lose faith. The coming year and a half will help to define whether we have a successful outcome or an unsuccessful outcome. I didn't say it will define it. It will help to define it. We need them to be vigilant. We need the OECS civilization to speak loudly to the press on this matter, and there are going to be opportunities to do that, because we need the court to hear that this matter is not a matter only of money. It's a matter which has to do with our whole construct of what a Caribbean civilization, a CARICOM, ought to be, which of course goes way back to the 1930s and 1920s. So George, from our mind, we just want to say to them, stay with us. Do not lose hope. We are working diligently, and we now believe that we have what is necessary to make that case before the court, as they will hear on Tuesday when they come in Grenada, on Wednesday in St. Vincent and the Grenadines, on Thursday in Dominica, on Friday in St. Kitts, and on Saturday in Antigua and Barbuda.
All right, so you're telling these people to continue having hope even after 10 years. You're saying, hey, they may have to wait another year and a half. Am I correct?
My view is that the court will be extremely careful in coming to a decision on this matter. This decision is the most complex decision that the court would have had to face up to this moment. This decision will define the court and the role and the place of community law for a long time to come. And so the court, in setting what would definitely be precedents, will be extremely cautious in making sure that they do that.
Fair enough. All right. Patrick, I can't have you sit here with me and not bring up politics. But before I do, I just want to, nobody wants to see a repeat of this insurance issue. Anywhere along the line, did you see any culpability on the part of the ECCB?
I don't want to point to the ECCB as an institution alone. I want to say, George, that the architecture allowed too many loopholes to exist. The architecture, the prudential requirements, the regulations, that the lack of transparency, the lax reporting, the compliance, that there were too many loopholes which existed in the individual states. And I want to say that in moving towards what we have in the revised Treaty of Basseterre, more in conformity with a monetary union, part of the process is what has been taking place more recently, of making sure that we harmonize the way in which we treat with a lot of these things. So I think there's been some progress, but at the time, George, it left a lot to be desired. In fact, when monetary scholars have looked at the way in which this was allowed to happen, for instance, those in the European community, which we've modeled our CARICOM off of, they are just basically appalled that we could have these rights for companies, but not have the architecture to protect investors and consumers in the case of these systemic failures. That's how I want to answer that question.
Right.
We've gotten better.
Fair enough. Okay. Dr. Antoine, here we go. I have to ask you this. I've been hearing rumors on the ground over the last, must be close to a year now, that you do have an interest in becoming the political leader of the national, he's smiling, playing with his mustache as he thinks, political leader of the National Democratic Congress. Is there any truth to that, sir?
George, the simple answer at this time is no.
And what's the complex answer?
The complex answer is that I have said ad nauseum to thousands of people all over the world that between the time I resigned and 2020 is a period which I'm dedicating totally to making up for some of the lost time with my children. And I'm very, very much in the middle of that. George, I have no regrets, and every day I thank God that I made that decision because I've seen too many colleagues suffer the consequence of this, because George, when they're gone, and my three are likely to be gone next year. Secondly, George, this is not about me. And I want to be very, very, very clear. I am a little comfortable. I suffer from a complex that my mother and father taught me called just enough. I have just enough. And before I step out to do anything, since it's not about me, I have to be spiritually guided by Jesus Christ and my faith that this is what I need to do. I have not sought that guidance, but I have not gotten any missives that guidance has come to me either. So the truth is that until I receive and until I'm ready, this is receive a signal from our Father that this is the move I need to make. At 55 years old, George, I'm not moving. Let me say that I'm concerned, though, about where the country is. I am concerned that clearly you have to be concerned. Everybody who has any interest in our country must be concerned by the lack of a strong opposition party. But Patrick Antoine is not ready. And Patrick Antoine, if he does become ready, will only do so after my children leave the coop and I receive a very clear message from my Lord and Father Jesus Christ without apology.
All right, and that pertains to the political leadership, I'm assuming?
That pertains to the political leadership of the NDC or any party.
Okay. But Patrick, I also happen to know that, having known you over the years, I know that you're very concerned about the state of this country right now in several different ways. Outside of political leadership, would you be willing to throw in your hat and offer some assistance to this country in helping us to turn around, Patrick? We need to turn around this place. People are hurting, and we have become the laughingstock of the world. Yet we're hearing that the country is booming. Huh? Patrick, are there any ways that you may be able to contribute in some way or another to taking us out of the doldrums?
George, I have been at the service of this country for many years, and even now, where we are saddens me, as you know. I am not of the view that all is well. There is too much poverty. I do not believe that we are addressing some fundamental issues that need to be addressed. I believe that when the Citizenship by Investment program does collapse, and it will, because the signs are all around us, that we're going to have a tremendously difficult time, and we need to start planning for that now. There are several other things I could say. But let me just say that I am prepared, and I will be playing a role as a public commentator on issues. I cannot offer myself for service for the reasons I told you before. I have committed this to my children this time, but when they leave the coop and so on, who knows, once I get that sign. But between now and then, George, I am here. My talent is available to all. I speak very often to colleagues in the public and private sector, and to colleagues in the opposition, very frankly. I don't have the hang-ups and idiosyncrasies, and I refuse to be defined by whether it's the green color or the yellow color. You have to understand, this is not new. This has always been my philosophy. And I remember receiving a tongue lashing, because when I was the ambassador in another time, I was found talking for a very long period to two colleagues from the opposition at that time, the NDC, because I like to engage. And there was a view that it sent the wrong signal. I have always been available. This is the only way I know how to live. I believe that is what makes Grenada attractive to me, and me attractive to Grenada. I just don't have time for it. So, George, I'm available for public commentary. I will be writing. I will be making my comments and my presence felt, and sharing my intellect and my experience as a concerned citizen. I'm going to be applauding the things that need to be applauded, and I'm going to be speaking out against the things that need to be called out. And that is really what you can expect from me, at least for the next year, and then we will see, what God has in store for me. And George, I told a colleague this morning, so many of my friends are not with us, George. And people say it, but you have to understand, this year, Jesus Christ got my attention. My father died in February, which is well known. What is less well known is that my mother's sister died in April. And even less well known is that my father's sister, we only buried on Friday. George, outside of one more aunt, that means that I am the oldest member of my family now. And my aunt, of course, is in her 80s. So this does give you a profound sense of responsibility, George, where you wake up in a year and your whole context is redefined. And all of this is saying to me, George, that we need to place more emphasis on God and on doing the right thing. Not when we're 70-something or 80-something, but we need to do it now, all of us.
Fair enough. Okay, Patrick, so you're saying you're a changed person.
George, I would say that God's been working on me for a while, and this year he got my attention.
Okay.
I would say that I want to be a better father, I want to be a better son, I want to be a better citizen. It's not about where you've come from, it's about where you're going, and you may feel, you're not so bad, but God has a perfect plan for us.
Okay.
And I want to be one of those who can fulfill that plan.
Finally, Patrick, finally. You said something a moment ago which sort of piqued my interest. You were suggesting that the citizenship by investment program, its demise may be imminent. What makes you say that, Patrick?
George, even though things have improved a little bit, there are too many instances where the proper due diligence isn't carried out, and I'm not just talking about Grenada. We have a way of taking comments out of context. I want to be very, very clear publicly, is that I'm not just talking about Grenada. In fact, I think Grenada has made some efforts in putting some systems in place, but I think mistakes were made in the past. But there are countries such as those I will not name in the Eastern Caribbean where there are problems. And the European community, the Canadian government, the United States government, and other states, including Georgia, other CARICOM states, are concerned that someone who carries your passport, for whom the due diligence process may have been less than thorough, could essentially be a guest or a visitor, or as it were, a resident, or a beneficiary of rights under the treaty. They don't know who they are. And I think that that's something that we need to be concerned about. In any event, George, I'm not sure that that was ever going to be a sustainable model for development. And I think we need to be thankful for the years that it operated and for the funds and the investment and the activity it brought. But that too will pass, George. And then we're going to be left with the fundamentals. And the fundamentals, to my mind, George, don't look so pretty. When I look at what we're doing with maths and sciences and our performance in exams, and when I look at the motivation that we're giving to our teachers to go the extra mile, and when I look at what's happening with poverty, when I look at what's happening with agriculture, when I look at what's happening with manufacturing, when I look at what's happening, George, with so many people who essentially have fallen between the cracks, it doesn't look so good. And, I say so as a concerned Grenadian and as a concerned man of the soil. There's too much poverty, and we need to try to find a way to deal with that. So the Citizen by Investment Program will go because the external pressures on it, because it's now become, as it were, an issue that many countries are concerned with on security grounds, to my mind, makes it untenable and unsustainable. And we need to plan beyond that.
So notwithstanding the lack of proper due diligence, are you at all concerned about the apparent malfeasance on the part of some of these governments here in the Caribbean?
That's a big question. I like to keep my comments to countries where I have intimate knowledge of. I am concerned that we have countries which, like other countries, where the governments tend to overreach. I want to put it that way. I'm not being diplomatic, but I have to be very careful, because anything I say publicly, I'm prepared to stand behind. There's overreach on the part of governments, and that worries me. I'm making the point on overreach in the context of the Citizen by Investment Program too, where oftentimes the governments reach in to the architecture of the institutions and essentially subvert the systems. And that is part of the problem that we have when we see people not having the proper screening process and the proper due diligence processes applied. So yes, George, I'm concerned with the overreach of governments, and I'm concerned that we have institutions in our region which, whether by design or by their very operations, the operationalization of them, are too weak to, as it were, fend off the overreach of governments. I hope I'm clear.
You said you're not being diplomatic, but you certainly were diplomatic. Patrick, hey, thanks again. I've always enjoyed our little tete-a-tetes, and I do appreciate it. But it would be nice to see you again in person. I want to shake your hand.
George, I am going to be with you the next time, and I will bring the coffee. I haven't forgotten that. Once you promise that you will have the guavas, etc., outside to greet me as I mount the steps.
Yes, Patrick. Yes, Patrick. Thank you so much, friend. Good to see you. All righty, folks. There you have it. I knew this would get you guys making comments. There are a few, so please allow me to share them with you, at least some of them. First of all, Nicole Gittins Kitchenama says, what is this eventually going to cost the policyholders in recovery of lost investments? The judiciary managers, expert lawyers, etc.? Nicole, I cannot answer your question, and I just want to remind you, you probably got here a little bit late. Just want to remind you that what you were looking at over the past few minutes is a rebroadcast of a little session we had here yesterday morning. You know that yesterday we were not able to log on to Facebook Live, but when we actually did the program at the normal time, pre-recorded it, and then put it up on the websites, various platforms. Margaret Francis has a question here. A couple of questions. What does Dupre's health have to do with it? Yes, getting the funds back means seizing Dupre's assets. Remember Bernie Madoff? Everything was seized, down to his wife's jewelry. See, folks, a lot of people don't realize that there are many of you out there capable of thinking and ask the right questions. As we scroll down here, there's a comment from John. John responds to Margaret by saying, exactly, Margaret. I bet all his ill-gotten gains are being spread around his family and his will. So they also should be pursued to recover these assets. So says John. Oh boy, do I wish we had that program live yesterday so that you guys could have posted these comments. I'd really love to hear what Patrick had to say. Nicole Gittins Kitchenama has another question here. What is in place to avoid this happening again? Yeah, good question. But like I said, Nicole, can't answer because Patrick don't hear right now. But John responds to Nicole by saying very little by the sounds of it. Yeah. Okay. Nicole comes back and says, exactly. New entities expanding. People investing all over. But how safe are their monies? Good question. And then she goes on to say here, it's called greed. Penalized for saving and investing for the future. Yes, Nicole, yes. And finally, Ryan Jaban says, OECS insurance policy payers got taken. Big time, Ryan, big time. Yes, sirree. Well, folks, it's been informative, and I certainly hope that you guys learned some stuff here this morning. And I'm sure that Patrick's going to be looking at this morning's program, so I'll probably give him some food for thought when they meet tomorrow to chart the way forward. Quick break. Come back and wrap it up.
We are honored to partner with the Grenada Schools, Inc., the Ministry of Education, and the Caliste Government School in providing this library. GCPI program put $120,000 or 66% of the cost of the library. But it's not an investment that is intended to bring a financial return. It is an investment in the human capital of our youth in Grenada.
GRENADA has shown us their seriousness about partnership, their seriousness about education, and their seriousness about nation building. That local partnership tells our major donors that Grenada is interested.
We have got a big vision at Grenada Schools. We believe that what we can do is, through literacy, have the most literate country in the Caribbean. We are very happy that you've got this gift from ourselves and from GRENADA.
We see this library as a unique and valuable resource. One of the best things about receiving this library is that it honors and recognizes the efforts and contributions of a company like GRENADA and Grenada Schools Incorporated.
Since 1994, GRENADA shareholders have invested over $22 million. This has been invested in the communities throughout Grenada, Carriacou, and Petit Martinique. We hope this library will serve the students and school well for many years to come.
Juve chocolates, cocoa nibs, and cocoa balls from Diamond Estate Grenada are now available at Amazon.com, Amazon.ca, Amazon.co.uk, and GrenadaMarket.com. Try the sensational touch of nutmeg and a touch of ginger chocolates, 75% dark and rich, 100% pure cocoa, and their 60% dark and sweet chocolate bars today. Amazon Prime members enjoy free shipping on these orders in the USA, Canada, and Europe. GrenadaMarket.com. When you can't come to the island, the products of the island will come to you.
Alrighty, folks, a couple of things before we go. First of all, says John here, he says, overrun again, George, but well worth it. Thanks. I'm glad you enjoyed that, John. And Ryan has some advice to you folks. Please, be careful when investing. Please, be careful. There's a note that came in here shortly after 9 o'clock this morning, just after we started the program. And this came from the Met Office at the Maurice Bishop International Airport. There's a trough of low pressure about 300 miles west of the Cabo Verde Islands, which has an 80% chance during the next 48 hours and a 90% chance in 5 days of becoming a tropical cyclone. You heard that, okay? A tropical wave is also forecast to emerge between Africa and the Cape Verde Islands in a few days, and will have a 0% chance in the next 48 hours and a 30% chance in 5 days of becoming a tropical cyclone. These systems do not pose an immediate threat to the state of Grenada, all right? Folks, it looks like the Atlantic is finally coming alive as we start the second half of the 2019 hurricane season. One parting word as we hightail it out of here comes to you from the book of Luke, chapter 12, verses 11 and 12. When you are brought before synagogues, rulers, and authorities, do not worry about how you will defend yourselves or what you will say. For the Holy Spirit will teach you at that time what you should say. Does that give you a little confidence? Sure hope it does. Because believe me, we're all being taken to task one way or another. Luke chapter 12, 11 and 12. Yeah. That's going to do it for the Monday morning edition of Gudday Grenada. Thank you so much for joining us. It's been a good morning. Do appreciate your company and your patience. By God's grace, we'll see you tomorrow morning at 9.